Hi, this is Pod Save the UK. I'm Zoe Grunewald.
And I'm Coco Khan. This week, Keir Starmer is preparing to visit the White House, but with Trump clinging to Putin, can he persuade the US president to change his tune on Ukraine? I'll be speaking to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
And later, where is Kemi Badenoch? No, seriously, have you seen anything from her?
Have I seen anything from her? I haven't, which I'm kind of fine with. But I'm probably not the right audience because my entire X feed is just Rupert Lowe.
Oh, no.
Rupert Lowe and hardcore porn, I think.
I didn't know
combination.
I didn't know you were a Rupert Lowe superfan.
Don't try it. Don't do this fake news to me. This is not fair. But anyway, we'll also be asking why the official opposition is missing in action. So Zoe, it's lovely to have you back filling in for Nish this week. He's on tour in the States and you're here with me.
I'm here with you and I'm very happy about it, so thank you.
Well, before we get into the big news of the week, I need to tell you about this Elon Musk story. I hate talking about this man, obviously, but it's just a bit mad. So Musk is leading the US Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and he issued hundreds of thousands of federal employees with an ultimatum. And it basically said to respond to an email with the subject line, "What did you do last week?" They had to respond to this or resign. So, yeah, the email said, please reply with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week and CC your manager. Musk then followed up on X. Failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. So I guess, Zoe, the question is, what have you been doing?
Oh, this is like every worker's worst nightmare, right? This is actually why I went freelance. I used to have recurring nightmares about my manager asking me to provide 5 examples of what I'd done that week. I've actually been quite productive. I've been writing a piece about how the far right is obsessed with violence against women and girls.
I can see you sort of shifting in your seat.
Yeah, I'm like, I've done loads of things, I promise. This is a conversation I only ever need to have between myself, now I'm freelance, and my accountant once a year. Okay, so I'm not used to it. And apart from that, I've just been enjoying lots of great TV.
Oh, that's good to hear. Do you want to know what I've been up to?
Of course I do.
I've done the greatest accomplishment of all time. I changed an NHS medical appointment. Do you know how hard that is?
Yeah, I do. I do know how hard that is.
I had to go into training, like every morning waking up, like rocky music. Today, Coco, you are not going to let her hang up on you. You're going to phone at 8 a.m. You're going to sit in that queue. You're going to press every option on the telephone menu until you get a human being.
I'm very impressed.
Thank
Did you manage to get one for this year?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I know.
Congratulations.
Hard work.
All right, on to people who have definitely been making their jobs count this week. Keir Starmer has made a massive announcement that the UK will increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, funded by cuts to foreign aid. Here's a clip of Starmer on Tuesday.
In the short term, it can only be funded through hard choices. And in this case, that means we will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027, fully funding our increased investment in defence.
Now, as we record on Wednesday, Starmer will be heading to Washington tomorrow for his first visit to the White House for the biggest test yet, really, of Starmer's diplomatic and negotiating skills. So, Zoe, what's the meeting going to be about?
So Starmer is essentially going to want to try and persuade the US to offer some security guarantees for Ukraine that will contain rather than embolden Russia. So there were lots of questions about this kind of backstop. So if there was a deal that had been agreed, there would have to be provisions in place, potentially boots on the ground from European allies, but also maybe the US as well, that would prevent Russia from seeing an opportunity to go back into Ukraine and invade again. They're also probably going to talk about trade. That kind of has gone on the back burner because Ukraine has been in the forefront as well. But obviously we know that Trump is potentially considering putting tariffs on the UK. And so I think what Keir Starmer's going to want to do is try and sweeten this a little bit by offering maybe some concessions to Trump, maybe over agriculture, for example, to try and convince him to not punish the UK as part of his domestic economic agenda.
Well, because Trump has been saying for a while that he wants NATO allies to spend more. And in effect, he got his wish. Okay, it's not the amount that Trump wanted, but it's some move towards it. Do you think that will be enough to placate him?
Well, I think there's a real general feeling that 2.5% is not enough and it's not soon enough because it's by 2027. But I think what is maybe more key here is Sir Keir Starmer's language. So he spoke, pretty passionately in the House of Commons about the need for this, about how they didn't want to cut foreign aid, about how, the Labour Party still see foreign aid as valuable. But they note that the global situation has changed. And I suspect for Donald Trump and for what he wants to do for the US, which is bolster its position in the world, make it the kind of strongman of the world, that just having the power and the influence to get countries to change their position will be enough to placate him. I think this is more about the politics than about the numbers at the minute. Whether that will hold in the long run, if the US continues to feel like they're overpaying compared to other countries, is a different question.
Do you think the fact they chose the foreign aid budget rather than domestic budgets was because they know that they would be extremely unpopular? I've got a little statistic here that says that, a YouGov poll found that 50% of Britons support an increase in defence spending. But when asked what was more important, defence spending or public services spending, just 30% said it is more important to increase spending on defence.
I think there's a couple of things here. I think the first is that there is cross-party consensus on the need to increase defence spending. Going for the foreign aid budget as opposed to other kind of public services is interesting because actually there is a lot of popularity for foreign aid in this country. Politicians haven't done very well at selling what foreign aid does. I think there's a feeling that it's often misused, that it goes to kind of building communities when we've got problems at home. Actually, foreign aid keeps us safe. And there's strong arguments on both the left of the political spectrum and the right of the political spectrum for the utility of foreign aid. You'll hear conservatives making impassioned arguments for foreign aid as well as politicians on the left. But it's quite an easy thing to go for, especially because we've seen Kemi Badenoch going for foreign aid recently. Donald Trump obviously cut the US's own foreign aid budget. It's one of those things where I think it's probably the low-hanging fruit, the easiest to go for because it has the public doesn't particularly like or understand it, and other politicians seem to be targeting it at the minute.
When you look at what the foreign aid budget goes towards, yes, of course, there's subjects and projects that are, I would say, a question of like ethics and morality, particularly in terms of, refugees and asylum seekers. But it is also a form of soft power. Interestingly, David Lammy, when Donald Trump announced his cuts, he called it a strategic mistake, which is kind of strange. That was only a couple of weeks ago that he said that. So it's a bit of an awkward situation for the Foreign Secretary. I mean, he argued at the time that it would allow China to fill the gap and extend its influence. I mean, that is surely still a concern.
I think so. There is a feeling that if we, as the West, stop providing money to various projects or various communities that have relied on foreign aid, there is a vacuum which another wealthy country who we might not have our interests aligning with could fill it. And I think that is the worry here. And you're absolutely right that there is community and nation building in foreign aid, but there's also things like vaccination programs. There is a real argument that foreign aid actually keeps us safer in the long term. It may prevent crises, it may prevent war, it may prevent people from getting sick and more pandemics. So actually cutting aid doesn't just have domestic implications for those countries, it has global ones as well.
No, definitely. And I do want to also just flag quickly that Action Aid, a charity that works with women and girls living in poverty, described Sir Keir's decision to slash the aid budget as reckless. And I think as two women, I think we should definitely shout that out. So now look, on to the meeting with Trump. Starmer will certainly be taking notes from the French President Emmanuel Macron. He struck the balance between flattery and gentle resistance. The meeting began with an absolute death grip handshake. Here's a clip from ABC News. Okay, so we're watching them meet. They're patting each other on the arm. And now we've got the handshake. Still shaking. We're still shaking. Oh, no, we're not letting go. We're still shaking. We're looking at the camera. We're still shaking.
Do you think that hurts?
Who will break first? Was it Donald? Was it Emmanuel? It's so hard to tell.
I guess in that situation, you have to squeeze back, right?
Oh, yes.
You have to out-squeeze the person who's squeezing you. This is why I can never be a politician.
Apparently that handshake, the showdown of the handshake, has a bit of a long history. Apparently it happens every single time. So I do wonder if they're in the back room, like, using the hand exercise machine, like, we will show you. Another little interesting tidbit is that Macron called Trump Dear Donald 4 times during the meeting. He slapped his knee, cute, and even in an absolute show of diplomatic prowess, fact-checked him on camera right within the Oval Office. Here's a clip from PBS News.
Just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear,
he didn't like that, did he?
I think he did like it. I don't know. Maybe I misinterpret Donald Trump's expressions, but I feel like he's just sitting there thinking, France. Oh, look at me. I'm in France. I'm talking to France.
He does do a sort of head shake, which is like, these are just facts. They're not important.
Yeah.
What's important is what I'm saying. It's good to see somebody fact checking Donald Trump live on camera because we don't really get that anymore.
Yeah. It really tells you about the power of the charm offensive, doesn't it? So the French president practically skipped out of this tete-a-tete with the US president, lavishing praise on his very special relationship with France. Zoe, Starmer, can you see it? Can he deliver this?
Starmer's not Hugh Grant in Love Actually,
Yeah.
obviously. You know, he's not going to stand up and do a kind of rousing
He's
speech.
not going to do a national stereotype.
No, or the dance,
Okay.
thankfully. But I do think Starmer is probably at his best when he's making a case for something.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this comes from his background of a lawyer. You know, he's good on detail. We saw that when he was really skewering Johnson over Partygate, Boris Johnson, back in the day. He was really good at building a case, bringing the details, putting them to him. And if you're dealing with someone like Boris Johnson or like Donald Trump, who are light on truth, you know, they're not that bothered about facts. They just kind of bluster on and hope for the best. That can be quite good. But I think the problem is Keir Starmer, he just doesn't have that kind of leadership quality. He's more managerial. And I think he's nervous as well. He's nervous about what the US can do. The UK is in a very economically precarious situation. We're caught between the US and the EU. Macron is stronger because he's inside the EU. He has kind of the bluster of the rest of the union behind him. Whereas the UK, although in some ways it can be positive that they have historically acted as that bridge between the US and Europe, Trump is the unexpected force here. And I think Keir Starmer's just very, very nervous about dealing with this. We also have to remember he's only been prime minister for, 9 months or something?
Yeah.
This isn't the challenge I think he thought he would be dealing with this early on in his premiership. So he'll be good on some things, but I think on that kind of putting Trump in his place, probably not so much.
And what do you think Trump is going into this meeting thinking? What does he want from it?
There are things that the US want. So, you know, tariffs, as we spoke about before, that's the big elephant in the room. The UK really wants a trade deal, probably focused on tech and digital services. Trump will probably want concessions on agriculture, maybe on drug pricing as well. There are things that they both want from each other. It's not just that the UK is going in cap in hand, hoping that the US will give them something. But, you know, Trump, he likes to display strength. That's how he is bolstering the US's economy. That's how he's bolstering the US's position in the world. He's going in as a leader who has total power and control. And in some ways, giving him that and stroking his ego is probably the best way to get him to also do things for you. The other thing that Starmer probably will offer Trump is a full state visit. This was sort of rumoured in the papers over the weekend. He'll also offer him an address to both UK Parliament. So we might see Donald Trump do a speech here in the UK, which, you know, would be a very interesting one politically. I think they'll, you know, when you look at the MPs who have been quite critical of Donald Trump in Parliament, how's that going to go down?
I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, lots been made about Macron and his approach, but he did struggle to pin Trump down. The one issue which he made headway on, an apparent acceptance of European peacekeeping forces inside Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire, was later called into question. Trump has been deliberately vague, saying that he had asked Putin and Putin had not objected. Perhaps personal relations are not everything here, and I think that is just something for us to bear in mind, particularly with these volatile leaders. So with Starmer in Washington and Ukraine still at the centre of global politics, there's no better time to zoom out. This week on Pod Save the World, hosts Tommy Vitor and Ben Rhodes breaks down the latest on Russia's war, Trump world's international chaos, including CPAC's far-right love fest and Pentagon firings, and what Brazil's Bolsonaro's legal troubles mean for global democracy.
Plus, Bloomberg's Zeke Foe joins to unpack Argentina's wild crypto scam tied to Javier Milei. Listen to Pod Save the World wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube.
And now, after the break, I'll be talking to Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey about the difficult business of standing up to Donald Trump and golden toilets.
Oh, golden toilets.
Plot twist.
Pod Save the UK is brought to you by Voi. If you are considering using weight loss products, which is, of course, completely your choice, then you might want to know about Voi. Voi is a new weight loss program that combines medication and one-to-one lifestyle coaching to help you achieve weight loss healthily, happily, and in a way that sticks. Because unlike what we've all been told forever, that weight loss is about willpower and we just need to be trying harder, Voi knows that it's actually about finding the right approach for you. It's why they call themselves the last weight loss program you'll ever need. Through coaches and doctors, you'll get the support you need to stay on track. And with one-to-one coaching in the Voi app, Voi has already helped over 70,000 people lose weight and keep it off. Get started now and get an exclusive discount on the Voi program when you go to joinvoi.com/PSUK. That's joinvoy.com/PSUK. Treatments will only be prescribed if deemed appropriate by a qualified healthcare professional following a consultation. Join voi.com/PSUK to get started. Joining us now on Pod Save the UK is leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, Coco. Nice to be here.
You've got a bit of a reputation as the fun guy of politics. I think who could forget the bungee jumping and the paddleboarding stunts of the election campaign, which I have, just as a small tangent, like, I feel for you because I've got a reputation as being the fun party friend. And sometimes, you know what, Ed? I don't want to be that. I just want to be taken seriously. Do you feel the pressure?
Well, to be honest, most of my time in politics, I've been doing serious stuff, from the economy to health to the environment, whatever. And I take my job very seriously, actually. However, the key thing is I think you've got to make people laugh and smile and cry and get emotional about politics as well. And I think the problem is too many people on the left, on progressive politics, liberal left, almost take themselves too seriously. And I think that turns people off. And I think why I wouldn't ever want to ape their policies and values. If you look at what some people on the right are doing, they're engaging with people in funny ways that actually seem to be working. So I think if you don't try out different things and also be true to yourself, right? You know, I quite like having a bit of fun. I think, and you show that, then I think you've got a chance of grabbing people's attention. And I think it's a real failure of progressives that they haven't learned that from the likes of Johnson and Trump and others, frankly.
The authenticity thing is something that we've been talking about on this podcast a lot. And actually, you're now one of the few voices in Parliament that's willing to actually call Donald Trump out, to actually authentically say, no, mate, this is not really on. So on Monday, we heard that the US voted alongside Russia, Belarus and North Korea against a resolution in support of Ukraine. You called it a wake-up call to those cheerleading Trump in our country. So actually, my very first question, who are the cheerleaders? Go on, name and shame.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, aren't they? There's loads in the Conservative Party, there's Reform, people in parts of the right-leaning media. And I think it's quite shocking. I think they haven't learned the lessons of history. They haven't looked at the facts in front of them. And I think, particularly with Farage and Reform, the sort of the boot-licking of Trump and the back-slapping of Musk, I mean, it makes it sticks in my core. I mean, I think it's probably turning some of their own voters off. I think it's quite shocking. I always thought he was a bit of a plastic patriot, to be honest. And the moment he seems to be doing Trump's bidding and doing what's in Trump's interest more than what's in the UK's interest. So he's hardly a patriot, is he?
What are you thinking about Labour, though? Because they're walking something of a tightrope. They have to show diplomatic support for the new administration, but they also want to stand up for Ukraine, but they're also quite clearly afraid of pissing off Trump. Would you count that as effectively cheerleading it on?
No, I think it's slightly different, to be fair to them. I mean, if you're in the UK Prime Minister, you've got to try to reach out to the President of the United States, whoever they are. And America has been our long-standing ally, right? However, and here's the difference, I think. Sometimes the best way to talk to a friend is to be very clear and candid. And if you look at Trump in his history, if he smells weakness or desperation, he'll just walk all over you. And I think, although he won't like it, I think being clear and strong, showing you have alternatives, like working with our European colleagues, working with our Commonwealth colleagues in Canada and India and so on, I think that shows that we're not so reliant on him as he thinks we are.
But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head that he's someone who is personality driven. He likes to work with people he likes. And so there is always a risk if you stand up to him and tell him some hard truths. Perhaps he'll respect it, but perhaps he wouldn't. I mean, this might be a problem that you face yourself. So I noticed that Elon Musk recently called you, and we quote, a snivelling cretin. Congratulations on that, by the way. I think if Elon despises you, you're doing something right. You know, if you found yourself having to work with his administration, what would you do? Surely there'd be consequences to the outspokenness.
Well, here's a few things. J.D. Vance, not someone I would normally reference, but the vice president, he did call Trump Hitler in the past, or the nearest thing America had to Hitler. And he's now his vice president. So Trump's quite easy to get over this thing, and he will get over it. And if you make it clear that you'd like to be his friend, but if he plays the fool and is a bit of an idiot and sells America short and sells America's allies short, that you're not going to play with him today. I thought Macron didn't do too bad at the Oval Office of the day. So I think it's possible to do it. You know?
And he does seem to like Macron as well. So that doesn't seem to have backfired.
I mean, what Macron was pouring praise and sycophancy and then very carefully saying what he wanted to say in Trump's hearing when they were both on camera. I thought it was quite a masterclass, actually.
Let me talk to you about defence spending, though. So you've been saying that spending needs to go up. Today, the government announced plans to do just that, promising 2.5% of GDP. The big surprise, though, in Starmer's speech was how he intends to pay for this increase. Mm-hmm. So it's our international aid budgets. It's obviously attracted immediate criticism from organisations like Save the Children. They've called it a betrayal of the world's most vulnerable children. What do you think of this?
You're right. We have been arguing for higher defence spending, and that bit of the statement we support. But we had put forward other ways of funding it. Mm-hmm. So we had said you could increase something called the digital services tax, which is a current tax at 2%. We reckon put it to 10%. It hits 20 multinational companies, extremely profitable, well-off companies. Quite a lot of them are US tech companies. I'm sure they're willing to pay for the defence, and obviously they're very rich, so I hope they don't mind supporting the poorest in our world too. So here's an alternative. I've got two others that he could have looked at and he didn't talk about today. All those Russian assets that are in our banks, we've seized them, but let's confiscate them. Let's actually turn them into cash. There's over £22 billion of Russian assets in the UK alone. And there's been talk of working with European colleagues for a European rearmament bank, like we had after the Iron Curtain was raised. So there are other ways of doing it, quite serious, well-considered ways, and that would mean you wouldn't have to take the overseas aid money away. And let's face it, I think it's quite a short-term approach doing that, because who's going to fill the gap when that money goes? It's going to be Russia and China. The US has already pulled out in a massive way. If we pull out as well, we'll maybe take other Western allies with us, and the gap will be filled by our enemies. Long term, it's really bad defence strategy.
Do you think it's genuinely possible to put money into defence and not feel the pinch at home? Because look, all the polling suggests that the reason people are losing faith in the government and politics in general is because of the cost of living. And I think there will be some people in some parts of the country who, rightly or wrongly, will say, hang on a minute, why are we paying for a conflict that's really far away when in my neighbourhood there's so many children and so many things that need fixing? I mean, are these two things at odds?
Well, I mean, as I've just explained, we've found ways which wouldn't hit ordinary people. But let me give you other ways as well. I mean, I think this government's generally been quite timid in its relationship with Europe. Mm-hmm. Two issues we've been campaigning on in this parliament have been the idea of getting rid of all those trade barriers that the Tories put up, that have made trading almost impossible, and impossible for some small and medium-sized firms in the UK. And that means we're growing less strongly. There's less money going to the exchequer as a result. So let's have another customs union like we used to with the EU. Let's have a youth mobility scheme. I mean, the EU put it on the table. We say yes. Let's do that too. These things would grow the economy, and it's the growth that actually is the fundamental problem for our exchequer. Okay,
well, putting aside the pinch that could be coming or shouldn't be coming, I feel like to say that you're anti-war, if you said that out loud, people would just scoff at you and laugh at you. This is ridiculous. What a terrible perspective to have. But there is just something here where an increase in defense means we're becoming a bit more militaristic. We're becoming a bit more war ready. And on a personal note, that does make me a little bit anxious. What does it mean to be anti-war in this day and age?
First of all, the reason I really strongly support increasing our defense, working with our European colleagues and others, is because that's the best way to avoid war. If Putin thinks that you're strong, he won't come and attack you. And I know that sounds odd to some people, but actually it's been proven over many, many years, many, many countries. If you're strong, they won't come in for you. So that it's the way to avoid war, first of all. I think the second thing is, because different wars you should respond different ways. So, Harold Wilson back in the 60s was right not to join the Americans in the Vietnam War. Absolutely right. Liberal Democrats voted against the Iraq War.
Yeah, famously.
Bad war. There was no justification for it. And it actually turned out very badly, completely disrupted the whole of that region of our world and led to more wars and more killings and more terrorism. So individual decisions, you have to take judgments on the basis of that. So we were really clear we should be supporting Ukraine. And I'm really clear we need to build up our defense because Russia is a threat. I don't think that's disputable, whether you're from the sort of progressive left, liberal centre, or wherever you are on the political spectrum, frankly.
It is strange though. Like I can feel myself sometimes when I'm talking about can't we all just get along? That I'm trying to put flowers into machine guns or something, which seems all very passé. Nobody's doing that anymore. But it does feel like the global temperature is rising in terms of aggression, in terms of the prospect of war. I mean, how worried are you at the moment?
I am worried. I've been worried on the Ukraine front for some time. I've been worried about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. I'm worried about what's happening in Yemen and Sudan. I mean, there's wars in many parts of our world which are horrific, and millions of people are losing their homes. Tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, are being killed. So it is shocking. You're right to worry about that. But the question is, how do you respond to that?
Okay, what about being more neutral?
Well, in any one circumstance, if that's the way to promote peace, I'm for it. But I don't think Russia, and certainly Vladimir Putin, is going to take much notice of neutrality, frankly. And if you look at the human rights abuses, I mean, they killed innocent citizens in their attacks. They keep doing it. They're abducting children, taking Ukraine to Russia. They're behaving the most appalling ways. War crime after war crime. I don't think neutrality is the right response to that. I think being tough-nosed and hard, because this man is a war criminal. He'll go down in history equivalent to Hitler and Stalin and all the rest of those dictators that brought so much misery. And the only way you deal with them is to be strong.
I just felt I had to ask that for all the pacifists listening in.
Well, I respect their views, okay, and I understand that. But I'm afraid I don't think, faced with people like Putin and people like Hitler, that's sufficient.
So Starmer is meeting Trump on Thursday. If you were in his shoes, shaking his hand with an iron grip, what would you say to him?
I'd say, hello, Mr. President. How are you? Good to see you. I'd compliment him in some way. And then I'd sort of try to find a way to win him over gradually. I'd be looking at the tapes of what Macron did. I'll be talking to President Macron, because I did think he played it pretty well. I think that's quite stylish from the French president, and that's what he's got to try to do.
Well, I mean, if you want a suggestion from me, I know he's a big fan of the royals, and there's so much great royal goss out there.
Hey,
affairs,
now.
So many affairs, secret children. You just need to get yourself on Reddit, Ed, and you'll find it. And
Coco,
that's the way.
You're on something, because I actually said in the speech, even before he was inaugurated, that we should offer him a state visit.
Yeah.
A banquet at Buckingham Palace, because I think you're right. I think he loves all that stuff. He loves the king, and yeah, you're right. But I said you had to get something out of it, because this guy's transactional, right? He just does deals. And so the deal would be, you can have a state visit and supper at the palace, but you've got to do X, Y, and Z.
I just have this vision of the Trump baby blimp being brought back. Probably not the best idea.
Well, you could ask him, and how much do gold toilets cost these days? The king wants to know.
The price of gold, by the way, is very high. Just letting you know. It's something that I know. I'm Asian. These are things that I know. Sir Ed Davey, thank you so much for joining us on Pod Save
You're very
the UK.
welcome. Nice to talk to you.
PodSave the UK is brought to you by Aura Frames. Listen, if you know somebody in your life who loves taking photos but has no ability or interest to print them, I'm talking about my parents. They have no ability or interest in printing photos, but they love photos. You need to just do what I've already done, what Coco's already done, and give them an Aura frame.
Exactly. It's a stylish digital picture frame. You upload directly from your phone. It's been named #1 digital picture frame by Wirecutter and loads of other places for a really good reason. And I'll tell you why. It's easy. It's easy. Your parents can understand it. That's how easy it is.
It's been featured in 495 gift guides during 2024 alone, selected 3 times as one of Oprah's favourite things. That's big. And it was named the #1 digital picture frame by Wirecutter, The Strategist, and Wired. It's been recommended by Fast Company, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and high-end home design publications. And I cannot stress this enough, Oprah Winfrey.
It takes about 2 minutes to set up. Again, I've said it before, but I'll say it. It is really, really easy, and it's a really good gift. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box. You can add unlimited videos and limited photos. You can get people access to it so they can directly upload their photos, which I think is kind of asking for trouble in certain friendship groups, isn't it?
Well, you do have complete control over who has access to your frame, and the Aura
but
app
come on,
allows...
if you gave me access, I would put up trolley photos that would appear in your house when you least expect it. That's obviously what do I do. But anyway, you have settings against that.
Yeah, and it lets you share photos more securely than with the email, which many other digital frames require.
They look great as well, the photos. They look like real prints. They've meticulously calibrated these high-resolution displays. And unless you look really, really closely, you'd never know it's a screen.
Right now, you can save on the perfect gift that keeps on giving by visiting auraframes.com. For a limited time, listeners can get $20 off their best-selling Carver matte frame with the code PSTUK. That's auraframes.com, promo code PSTUK.
Don't forget to mention that we sent you to show your support for the show. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, so before the break, we heard my conversation with Sir Ed Davey, which was really interesting, if a little brief. I definitely could have spoken to him for longer. What did you make of it?
I thought there were several interesting things in there. I really liked that he made the case for a digital services tax, so increasing the amount that these kind of big digital companies that mostly based in the US would be paying, and that would kind of help bolster our defense spending. Because Amazon only paid 18.7 million last year, which sounds like a lot until you consider that their British arm alone raked in 27 billion. They're not paying their share. And I think there is real public support for increasing the tax burden, especially on those multinational companies that rake in lots and lots of money and aren't properly taxed here. I also thought he almost made like a pacifist argument in favour of defence, right? You asked him, how do we square it with actually just wanting peace? And he almost made it like it was an insurance policy. So the more defence you have, the more you put off potential attackers. But, the thing that I think is also really important to note is that's not just like artilleries and soldiers and military capabilities. That also has to be strong public services. How is the NHS going to survive a critical cyber attack? How would our critical national infrastructure survive an attack of that sort? And you also need communities who are strong and supportive of their country. So you need to build up public services, local authorities, councils, all those things. They need to be equipped to deal with the new kind of warfare we might experience. But also you have to create a country where people want to feel defensive of it. And I think part of the problem is if you just focus on defense spending as military, you kind of miss what people are fighting for or defending.
No, absolutely. And I think I still come back to this point about there's no denying that what is taking place is atrocious. And any civilian across the world who dies in a conflict of its leaders, it's just a shame. It's just awful. And so obviously I know something has to be done. It's not that you can't do anything. But I still come back to this thing being like, is military the only way? Are there other ways?
Yeah, and I think the reality of, what does it mean to send troops to Ukraine if the conflict could keep going or if it could flare up again? That would mean British civilians dying.
Exactly. And that impacting our communities.
Yeah.
We're
sort of talking about defence spending as a kind of economic concept when actually it can mean bloodshed and devastation in our communities.
Yeah. But like you said, I think he makes a very, very powerful argument. And I do still come back to this point about like, what does it mean to be anti-war in the modern age? Is this a concept that we should, as progressives, still fight for, to latch on for? What does it involve? I don't know if I have the answer for that, but it was definitely a fascinating conversation. So look, the Liberal Democrats are setting themselves up to be a credible opposition, but the Tories, the official opposition, on the other hand, well, just listen to this clip of Kemi Badenoch from Parliament on Tuesday.
So I welcome his announcement on repurposing money from the overseas development budget. That is absolutely right. And I look forward to him taking up my other suggestion of looking at what we can do on welfare. He will know that we had a fully funded plan and we urge him to take it up. Having said that,
so that was Badenoch there, full of charisma and championing the fully costed welfare plan of the previous government, which in short order gave Starmer a fantastic moment of riposte, pointing out that their welfare plan had been laughed out of town by both the independent economics research organisation, the IFS, and the Institute for Government. So I think it's probably worth mentioning that I'm pretty sure that's the only clip we've played in Pods Over the UK of Kemi Badenoch since she became Tory leader. It's been 100 days now, and she is failing to cut through, not even enough for us to make fun of her. And we love doing that. So Zoe, what's going on here?
It almost makes you miss Liz Truss, because like at least she had, like there was loads of golden material. Like there was lots to make fun of. There was a really good quote by John Crace, who's a sketch writer in The Guardian, who said, the more you get to see of Kemi, the less there appears to be. And I think that's true. You know, people thought she'd be this really punchy leader who would put Starmer in his place and fight for conservative values. And actually, beneath this kind of condescending facade, there's not very much going on. And I think the thing about the Conservatives is it's not like the supporters of the Conservative Party have lost their conservative values. They just don't like the Conservatives anymore. And part of that, Kemi would argue, is because they've shifted towards the centre. I would argue it's because they were totally incompetent and corrupt for 14 years. So if you want to turn around the fortunes of the Conservative Party, there needs to be a degree of humility and grace. And Kemi Badenoch does, to her credit, say we've made mistakes, but none of those mistakes seem to be Kemi Badenoch's fault. They seem to be everyone else in the party, as if she didn't serve in previous governments, you know? So I think she comes across badly, unwilling to engage and a bit delusional. But there is also an existential issue with the Tories, which we've spoken about before, which is they are fundamentally divided. They are divided over everything: Britain's position in the world, the economy, taxation, Brexit, the environment, things they all used to agree on. But then the sort of Tory moderates were purged, and now there's just kind of the right and a few moderates. So coming up with any workable policy that the party will get behind is actually impossible. So she's got no policy positions, but also she's got no charisma.
I mean, and you're exactly right. It is just culture warring. That's all she's doing. So, you know, we tried to look into examples of where she's got the headlines recently. You know, this week she called for an end for the BBC licence fee due to a Gaza documentary that ended up being pulled. She's got a headline or two for saying, oh, you know, we should steamroll international law. I think, you know, recently she chatted about sandwiches. She's been on Jordan Peterson's podcast.
I know. I listened to it.
Oh, that is sad. I didn't know you were into self-harm. That's a shame.
I listened to it for my work. You know, that's one of the things I did this week, actually, Elon. I listened to Jordan Peterson's podcast. It was terrible. They're both seeing who can do more word salad than the other one. You know, she's stuck in this podcast circuit, I think because she's trying to capture these voters who care more about ideology maybe than they do about policy. But she just talks herself into weird kind of segues and then doesn't really explain them. Like, she talks a lot about how she's a Christian, a cultural Christian.
Okay.
She says that culture is upstream of religion. To me, that sounds all quite dog whistle. You know, what is a cultural Christian? Like, Christianity is a religion.
Yeah.
It's all very strange. She's very anti-immigration. She talks very passionately about how she hated woke people at university and got in lots of arguments with them, which, you know, is not a good basis by which to select your next prime minister. But yeah, she's just stuck in this kind of podcast circuit, never getting a newsline across. She's not being interviewed by proper journalists. And I do think that makes a difference. They know how to craft a narrative and get a headline. And if you're just talking to Jordan Peterson for 2 hours, I mean, who cares?
It's all just like, you know, internet arguments and not even up-to-date ones. Do you know what I mean? We've moved on, Kemi. We're not talking about the National Trust anymore. We're talking about Luigi Mangioni's loafers. Like, come on, get with it.
And, you know, the anglerfish. You know about the anglerfish?
No, I don't know about the anglerfish.
Coco, you really need to make sure
you're not really my scene.
You need to make sure you're well briefed before we record, okay? Because the anglerfish is all over TikTok.
Oh, is it?
So anglerfish,
the new mudang.
The new mudang, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So they usually live 2,000 meters below the surface, but one was caught surfacing like in Tenerife the other day, and it just become a Gen Z meme and obsession. So there's loads of footage of this anglerfish with beautiful piano music, people saying like, if you don't believe in yourself, be more like this fish who, you know, took their last moments in the sunshine. People are saying this is the Gen Z zeitgeist. You know, this fish captures how lonely and isolated Gen Z feel and is a kind of beacon of hope in a world of Kemi Badenoch and Jordan Peterson.
Wow, okay.
And she's not even mentioned that.
She's not even mentioned, what are you doing? You're not online enough. But on a serious note, James Cleverly, he must be rubbing his hand together, right?
James Cleverly is really interesting, right? Because the other sort of successors, I guess, are Priti Patel, who was sat next to Kemi Badenoch in that clip. And then there's Robert Jenrick, who is, you know, we have lots of thoughts on Robert Jenrick. But they are trying to make themselves known and quite vocal. Robert Jenrick is always chiming in about various culture war issues. James Cleverly is keeping his powder dry. He's not really doing much. I think he's trying to disassociate himself from Kemi because when it all goes P-tong, which it probably will, he can jump in as the next Tory leader. And I genuinely think James Cleverly is someone who Labour would be pretty scared of.
Because we've spoken before about how it seems like Badenoch has just sort of seen Nigel Farage and said, I'm going to emulate that. Implicit in that is this idea that like Farage is brilliant, but the latest YouGov poll shows that there's a bit of a decline in Reform's numbers from 27 to 25%. You know, this like Trump-Farage bromance or whatever unrequited love thing that's going on, you know, it could be starting to hurt him. I mean, what do you think about Nigel Farage's potency right now?
The vast majority of people in the UK support Ukraine and they don't really like Trump and they definitely don't like Musk. Surprisingly enough, British citizens don't like it when people try and interfere in UK democracy from other countries. Yeah, it is funny, isn't it? So Farage hitching his wagon to Trump and Musk in the way he did was always foolish because they're erratic, they're ego-driven, they're not going to be your loyal friend, and they were always going to. I mean, Musk did turn on Farage, as we saw, but, you know, Trump's...
Do you think that's why I'm getting loads of Rupert Lowe content?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because Musk loves Rupert Lowe. I have heard other people say that as well. And, you know, Musk is known to try and alter the algorithms to get his content front and centre stage.
We should also mention the election result in Germany as well. So the Conservative CDU, led by Friedrich Merz, won the most seats and is likely to form the government, taking 30% of the vote. But the big winner in terms of voter gains was the far right, the AfD party, led by Alice Weidel, which won the support of 1 in 5 German voters and nearly doubled its vote share. This is the biggest result for a far right party since the Second World War. Are there lessons to be learned for us over in the UK, Zoe?
I think definitely. I think one of the biggest things we should take from this is that far-right movements can and do radicalise over time. So the AfD, when it was initially created, was a Eurosceptic and economically liberal party. Over pretty much a decade, became a sort of overtly fascist party. And, you know, at the moment here in the UK, Reform is obviously distancing itself from Tommy Robinson. But I think we need to remain vigilant about how quickly things could shift. Richard Tice has denied ideological alignment with the AfD, but some figures in the party, so the chair Zia Yousaf, has already expressed interest in learning from them. So already we're seeing within Reform there are different ideological shifts happening. And that's a pretty influential, you know, the chairman's pretty influential. Could we see Reform move even further right? And I think that's a pretty scary thought. The other obvious point for all of us to learn is that ignoring the far right doesn't stop it. So, you know, just trying to dismiss the AfD as extremists didn't stop it from rising. Even in Germany, where the real memory of fascism is so fresh, the only way you can counter far-right parties is strong alternatives, not just criticism. So don't just ignore them, present real policy solutions. And yes, immigration is something that they all kind of rally behind, but that's just snake oil. You know, really voters are, you know, they have concerns, real material economic concerns, and it's easy for the far-right to say it's because of immigration, but proper progressive parties need to say, we're going to have economic solutions to these issues.
Yes. So this seems like a good opportunity to think about Labour, actually, because, Yes, of course, we've been talking a lot about Ukraine and Trump, but there has been a few positive stories for the government. So last week, they met their commitment for bringing on 2 million more NHS appointments. We also heard about £270 million of culture funding too. But this news is not cutting through. These kind of economic solutions that, arguably could be a counter to far-right power. It's not making it. What's happening here?
Yes, I think there's a few things. The first is that there is that sense of things have gone so badly wrong in this country that even those little slices of good news, people just kind of think, okay, there might be more NHS appointments, but why can I still not get one at my GP? Or why is my mum still on an 8-month waiting list to get a hip replaced or whatever? People will be thinking, well, I can't afford a train ticket or I can't afford my energy bill. This week we saw energy prices go up as well. I think those kind of tangible things sort of neutralise that good news because people just think, I'm not feeling those things in my pocket. I think there's also a problem with Labour's messaging, which has just been we've talked about that before, but it's been so dour. And it's really hard to come back from that if that's the kind of tone you set your government off on. But I think they just need some big, bold wins that really change people's lives. I mean, so in April, there's going to be 750 schools that get this new trial of breakfast clubs. That's going to be something that actually, hopefully, we can immediately see makes life better for kids.
Yeah.
And hopefully, in a year's time, there'll be some research that shows their attainment or their productivity was better. And that could be a good thing. But again, it's just these little slices of things don't seem to actually compensate for the bigger picture of local authorities going bankrupt or the NHS being on its knees or people feeling like they've got no money and the general breakdown of, communities and people feeling unhappier. It's just really, really hard. And of course, the general kind of news agenda just being so focused on the rest of the world going to pot, I think, dampens anything because people think, great, £270 million for culture, but what if we get nuked in 5 years?
Yeah. Well, look, I think maybe Labour needs some help with their PR. One organisation they could be taking tips from are the Climate Change Committee, who this week created, I would say a relatable way of measuring our climate change impact, and it is kebabs.
Kebabs.
They've created a kebab measurement system. Yeah, so the Climate Change Committee has taken the humble kebab and given it to us as an understandable metric for our meat consumption and has suggested that Brits need to drop their meat quota from 8 to the equivalent of 6. So we eat the equivalent, apparently, of 8 doner kebabs, and we need to go down to 6.
Okay, I'm going to show myself as somebody who hasn't eaten a lot of doner kebabs. Are there not different sizes of doner kebabs?
Yes, there are.
Right, so
not enough information.
Kebabs, it's like, it's a bit of a sort of after a night out meal for a lot of people, isn't it? It's become part of our, our late night food.
Well, not for you.
Because I come from Yorkshire, always had a pie after a night out. I'm not even joking. There used to be the pie shop.
Yeah.
I shut down now, but we always used to get a pie. So if they told me I had to have 6 pies a week rather than 8, I'd be like, of course, that I can visualise that.
Right, okay. I love that you fulfil every Yorkshire stereotype.
Oh yeah,
that's really sweet.
Got my whippet waiting for me outside, my flat cap.
You keep it in the bag.
Yeah.
Some keep hot sauce, not you,
no.
Yorkshire tea.
Yeah.
Anyway, though, I do actually genuinely think it's a really great way of drawing attention to this issue. British people love kebabs. All of it was to draw attention to what the UK needs to do to meet its net zero commitments by 2050. So by 2038 to 2042, the majority of homes will need to have ditched their gas boiler for a heat pump, switch to an electric car, and of course, eat a few less kebabs.
Okay, good. Well, I'm just going to carry on eating my pies and drive around in my electric car and, talk about how great my hip pump is.
It sounds like it's like the 2025 version of Park Life, doesn't it? Driving around in my electric car. Zoe Grunewald, thank you so much for joining us today. Come back soon.
I will. Thank you so much.
Have a productive week.
Thank you. And I will be sure to send you an update of all 5 things I've achieved.
Yes, or it will be considered a resignation. So that's it, everyone. Thanks for listening to Pod Save the UK. Don't forget to follow @Pod Save the UK on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. We're on Blue Sky now too, guys. So please follow us at podsavetheuk.crooked.com. And if you want to see more of us, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Pod Save the UK is a reduced listening production for Crooked Media.
Thanks to senior producer James Tyndale and assistant producer May Robson, with additional research from Isabella Anderson.
Our theme music is by Vasilis Fotopoulos.
Thanks to our engineer Jeet Vasani. The executive producers are Anishka Sharma, Louise Cotton, Madeline Herringer and Katie Long, with additional support from Ari Schwartz.
And remember to hit subscribe for new shows on Thursday on Amazon, Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts.